asked a mystic, "Is there really any way to adequately describe the enlightenment experience?" "No," he replied. A man asked a mystic, "Are there any words sufficient to properly describe the further awakening of consciousness?" "No," he replied. A man asked a mystic, but before he could begin, the mystic replied, "When are you going to quit asking?" One man named his cat Give It Up, and from its relationship to all things non-feline learned much. Did not men calculate time by weeks, Sunday would not be such a slow news day. Yeah, you're damn right this is not simply about what it seems to be about, but has to do with how the linearity of routine thought is inseparably tied to man's feel of the temporal. Only those unfamiliar with the nature of trains perceive the individual cars as discrete entities. What have the hours on a watch to do with perception? What have words to do with understanding? And what have the ancestral track layers now to do with the neural directions you might take? Such a thought had one man. If I didn't sometimes feel bad, I don't guess I'd ever appreciate it when I feel good. What the hell kind of arrangement is that anyway? We now take you to a late-breaking story wherein we move the focus of our attention from one particular area to a different one, but which in fact is not really all that different. Death interests two groups. First, the ordinary because of their fear of it, and secondly, the mystic because of its potential in helping them to live more consciously. One man was born in Warsaw, then moved to a synagogue, then took up residence in a hair shirt, and finally realized that where one actually lives is strictly a private matter. Words may run, but they can't hide because they don't have to hide. They're not the hidee, they're the hider. A creation story from the land of the simple. In the beginning, as soon as the gods made man, simple man that is, they gave him his most important instructions. Always act serious and excited about stuff that doesn't mean anything. Also, by having him do so, they were able to keep track of him without having to bell him. One man told the crowd, "You people have about talked that subject to death." And they said, "Which one?" And he replied, "All of them." If your philosophical writings contain bits of biography, not only do you beg misdirected literary criticism of your work, but you also reveal that you know not the true nature of philosophy. Plus, you probably have deep encrusted mold in the groutings around your shower. Fact, in the ordinary world, more believe that they know what's going on than actually do. Fact within a fact. Those who believe they know what's going on know that they don't. How is it that anyone can claim that life's not fair? Now another scene from that comedy team, You and Not You. Once you know how to do it, you can do it. And the only problem then is just remembering to do it. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. Could you repeat that? Hey, are they a million or less laughs or what? The ironic is simply the inevitable misperceived. There was once a people who lived free, scattered, out on an open plain, each person alone and for themselves. Then they came together and built a village in which they all stayed and collectively prospered. After a time had passed, some felt confined and began to dream of a freedom for which they had no description. For a few of these, the dream turned to determination, and its pursuit, their life's work. The achievement, the awakening, the enlightenment, is the having of two homes, one in town, one on the lake. One man so construed life without the restraints of reality imposed on it would be like a carousel totally out of control, running in fact the risk of leaving a lateral plane and sailing off into some unknown hyper spiral space. Well, the theatrics don't cost anymore. It comes with anything off of column A. Regardless of what you thought I may have said, words and the ideas of others are important if you're going to stay at home. One man adopted this operational dictum. When you get tired of thinking about a certain thing, stop. He says the problem now is in realizing when he's become tired. This opens up a promising crack, which is that if you know what time a particular train is leaving, you don't have to ask anyone what time it's leaving. And more than that, you then don't even have to believe that you should ask someone, which, from a sophisticated traveler's view, was the problem to begin with. You children playing whip, you're still dragging your feet. A street corner conversation. Now can you tell me, how can you tell that a one-time spiritual system is running down? I don't know how. When it begins to devote its attention to matters external. In that case, it could go from being some metaphysical activity to becoming a political party, for instance. Exactly. Well, is there some further point to this? No, you about covered it. Note, while the above byplay would quite likely strike the ordinary as being confusing and unclear, it would indubitably do so were it to take place within one's own mind, which probably in part helps account for such so seldom doing so. Note. A nice thing about this kind of extraordinary activity is that you cannot be tricked or talked into it. And in fact, any assistance in this endeavor is damn near impossible. Of course, some could see this as being the unnice aspect. But if they're ever going to get anywhere, they're going to have to get over this. That when you try and unravel that not improperly raveled, you tend toward overkill. The rubric of the above could have been the bombastic grandiosity of man's collective mental life. Could have been. Why not? Regardless of what you may think that I previously indicated, it serves a simple well to appear serious and sincere. Just ask yourself, why do you hardly ever hear of a university president handing out diplomas while wearing a joy buzzer? The supreme interrogatory question: what does it take to understand the secret of life? Answer: a lifetime's effort and a pocket full of buckshot. Pardon me, but is that the only possible answer? No, but neither is that the only way in which to ask the question. Well, pardon me once again, but is what you just said supposed to be of some value? Could be, but not if you have to ask. Determination. It seems a shame that more people cannot engage themselves in such meaningful dialogue. At a border crossing this morning, local authorities broke open a container of drugs and discovered hidden in a false bottom a Zen master. A guy asked himself, once you've seen Constantinople, isn't it hard to go back to living in Cleveland? And replied, yeah, but what are you going to do? All forms of promotion are inherently deceptive in the same way that the secondary is by nature an imperfect reflection of the primary. To be normal, sane, and stable, each day you must see the same reflection of yourself in the mirror. To transcend the common, mundane, and jejune, you must be free of all reflective devices and look directly at things, including your apparent self. In the beginning, it seems no less difficult to relinquish your familiar ideas than it would be to give up foods that you at least find edible. Cliche update. There are those who want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but come to realize that ridding one's head of sullied neural juices is not a simple task. Thus, by the way, man's continuing frustration in distinguishing between the mind and the brain. The difficulty in separating the two is that there is no such separation. Graveyard update. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, but mainly they just stay where they are in your head. But hey, a reminder, even lowlifes don't stay where they're not welcome. You people from Mississippi, explain that one to those from Nebraska and Connecticut, perhaps. Now for you amateur thinkers and avocational vocabulists, tonight's fun definitions. Religion, mysticism on the cheap. Philosophy, the dumbing of the transcendental. And one man privately said, anyone who's already used a word I particularly like before I got around to it can bite me, sit on it, and get screwed, so to speak. The unseen logic regarding criticism. The simple don't deserve to be criticized, and the more complex can't be. The path of those seeking a new land begins with much excitement and enthusiasm. Then later comes a fear that it cannot be found. And most never get past this stage. The cheap moral is that you should never underestimate the power of fear. But the more complex one, worthy of a real adventurer, is that by not understanding the nature and source of all fear, one will always overestimate its significance. A broken track will certainly stop a train, but have no effect on a plane's progress. Query, what is the difference, save none, between boiled cabbage and the meditations of Marcus Aurelius? Excusez-moi. One man asked, where do you get all of your original ideas? And to himself he thought, it's good that the dead can still converse. Holding the book to his head, the man said, did the cover really say kills pain on contact? And now for some good news. In a land where nothing helps, nothing hurts. And now for some other kind of news. When desperate, some men will turn to metaphors, and when really desperate, others will resort to 9mm. Sham sincerity tends to whine. A man asked a mystic, what could the Enlightenment actually be other than another mental game? Only those who've eaten of a sardine Danish can appreciate the flavor outside its formal name. An out-of-sequence genie once visited Earth, and to keep its presence secret, hid right out in the open. You can tell that both raccoons and your thoughts have become rabid when they begin to stalk you. Across the land blows a wind, driving people this way, then that. And as into one another bump, it is with one another that fault is found. And strange though it sound, their complaints help fuel the wind. Concerning originality of thought as an actual mystical method, you could, in fact, look upon the effort to awaken consciousness to a higher state of enlightenment as the struggle against predictability. And to very... See, that was this done in a different key. For those of you that heard the first version. To varying degrees, all healthy sheep hang out somewhere near a flock, but only the dense attribute thereto any serious significance. As the old song says, fish got to swim, liver's got to liver, and so on. Unless you know how to use your mind in some non-standard way, you'll always be letting someone else think for you. Be ye aware of it or not. Bah. From the view, from within the confines of Bedlam, there being no basis for comparison, all therein seems perfectly sane and normal. Double. One man who for years had been trying to develop his consciousness beyond its natural-born level said to life, "When I'm getting closer, would you at least give me like some sort of secret sign?" Yeah. And life replied, "I'll do this much. I'll talk louder." Insofar as our recent references of what has always been called some transcendental experience, the enlightenment, etc., developing oneself in a non-physical manner. And my personal timidity of pointing out to you that it has nothing to do with a man's soul and spirituality. There is no vagueness, there is no inspecificity as to how this operates. It's right here. It's in one's mind. It's the highest possible end of the nervous system. Having said that, on more than one occasion, and having written a news item, reported a news item tonight, wherein a man pointed out something, at least in partial conflict thereto, then I will admit that it's hogwash. It's not true. It's truer than anything that's ever been described previously. It's truer operationally than any other possible description, because it has nothing to do with one's behavior. It has nothing to do with external conditions. It has nothing to do with following any teaching. It has nothing to do with following anyone else's ideas, which just about brings it down to the point of saying, well, what does it have to do with? That's almost nothing. And of course then I would be tempted to say, getting better. The description, in all due humility, is far superior than anything else available in the English language. And yet it remains, if not actual hogwash, a metaphysical condition of hogwash, because it doesn't actually tell you anything. The whole idea of people trying to undertake this, the whole idea that I have recounted for some of you, which was sort of superfluous since you had already recounted it in your own life, but I went ahead and had the compassion, if not stupidity, to describe having that kind of original itching, that kind of original questioning, that kind of think back, that original excitement and enthusiasm. Once you got past the initial, I'll call it slight discouragement, but if you did it in the proper chronological milieu, you started asking your parents and rabbis and priests and philosophers and teachers. You began asking them at such an early age that disappointment, was no big deal. By then you had not been conditioned by the flock, by the herd, to feel as though when you went and asked one who was reported to be a superior sheep, a cow with a diploma or an office, and you went to them with an important question like, what the hell's life about? And they started shuffling papers and giving you brochures and all sorts of things already printed up at the public's expense, trying to encourage you to rile for free brochures and to come watch them in action. You go, no, no, no. I was informed that you were the smartest person here in our city. and with equally due humility, very fleeting, they go, oh, shucks. And they go, what do you want to know, kid? And you said, what's the meaning of life? And if they were really sharp, just in a city sense, they will do what used to be known on the Bourse circuit as a real quick shuffle and try and distract you, like point up to a flag or a picture of some religious leader or ask you if you wouldn't like a lollipop. Or, And I said, well, ask me something actually worthwhile. And you said, no, that's all I want to know. Plus, now you've raised another question. Is how come all of you people who are in charge and reputed to be the smart ones, how come you can't even tolerate the question? Then they can really get in some fancy footwork or throw you out. But we'll assume that you did not get that discouraged. And then the point was, the first time you ran across some notion of this, a book, most likely, that had to do with the idea of some great secret work that's been going on, some line of succession of men who in some way were in touch with past gods, or some way that they knew a secret. And as soon as you read that, as soon as you heard it, you went, yes, now I understand. And as soon as you saw the word secret and et cetera, and you found that the book was not and had not been on the Times bestseller list, you realize, well, that's it. It is a secret affair. There is a kind of enthusiasm, and the enthusiasm is not something that you adopted from life, and it is not something that is environmentally generated. It was in your own nervous system. The enthusiasm was there. And then as I've tried to give you a certain kind of non-political, non-personal, should I say warning? No, you can think of another word than that. You think of it. Warning that if you don't watch it, you will fall into the same trap as those kind of people riding in the cattle cars, your mothers and fathers and priests and rabbis and presidents and prime ministers and philosophers. That is, the ordinary people. You'll fall in the same trap as them of suddenly being 60 years old, or nowadays possibly younger, and suddenly feel much wiser for a very simple hormonal physical reason, that you're dying. Your hormones are running down at an increasingly rapid rate of speed, and you're less and less sexually excited. You're less and less intellectually, of course, men will try and explain it another way. And it's beautiful. I'm getting around to why it is not simply an intellectual affair. But it is beautiful, again, the way life has things arranged, that those who are glib of tongue, those that have some city functioning intellect, can, contrary to what I just said, make a great defense of why wisdom does come with age. And plus, as the final shot across my furrowed brow, they will give you personal anecdotes. They will, in all due humility, sink low enough, humble themselves enough to use themselves as a what? Not a target, an example. He guessed it right, an example. Because they will point out to you. They'll say, well, listen to this. Listen to this. I used to be like you. I used to be very excited. I want to know what was going on in life. And I was all, but let me tell you something. How old are you, kid? And you go, well, 35 or 27. And he goes, well, I'm old enough to be your father. And I went through that. I read those books, and I got all excited. But let me tell you what. Don't burn yourself up. Don't drive yourself crazy. Just kind of hang in there, and you'll be surprised. I mean, don't lose sight of the aim. Don't forget what you originally sought. Don't give it up. But, kind of give it a break. You'll be surprised how much wiser, how deeper hath increased thy understanding when you get 60. And he's not the first person ever said it, but there it is, someone who seems to be speaking from experience, which he is speaking from experience. He just doesn't know what the experience is. The less you are driven by what the primary life of man, of all of the biosurvival instincts, they manifest themselves into, we're still discussing, average, sane, sophisticated people in my examples. And this man who gave you the promise, if not caveat, that you would get wiser with age and not to be too upset by your lack of great spiritual or intellectual achievement at this particular juncture in your life. Everyone included in the same middle-of-the-road, sophisticated, civilized people. You go from being a child and being driven simply, obviously, by the need of the body to survive, and as you become civilized, as you become a literate, mentally alive person, then the primary survival level instincts become reflected, become interpreted into the civilized world, which I've been calling the secondary. Then the process, in a sense, reverses itself, which those of you that are real sharp, you might catch on that, dying is kind of the reverse of being born. Am I losing my touch as a humorist? Or you just don't find that funny? We'll let it go. It does literally sort of reverse itself. Well, in a sense, if you look around, old people become almost kids. They're more trouble. But their faces get all wrinkled up, and sometimes you have to put them in diapers, and they're unruly. Their attention span is not much. About like that, a drummer on the road. Between girlfriends, I might add. And short on drugs. But the process, literally, it literally, well, enough for me to say it, it reverses itself. That is, the older you get is why it is so tricky for it to pass off as wisdom. Now, I know we've been through this, and it's not just a warning for people getting older, because everyone's getting older. That was the original, is to watch it. But it is so seductive that there is no literal, at the ordinary level, there is no literal intellectual defense. There is no real intellectually sophisticated or acceptable naysaying to the claim that it is very possible, if not inevitable, if you're just sane, to become wiser with age. There is no logical defense to that. You cannot get an ordinary sane person to accept much of a naysay to that. To say, well, no, you don't. And then they would probably say, well, we're not talking about someone who's like an alcoholic or in some ways developed Parkinson's disease or have become mentally, physically impaired. If they're just an average person, they will inevitably, to some degree, become wiser with age. And you would be a fool to argue with an ordinary mind about that. There's just you cannot get your finger into a crack with an ordinary mind to say otherwise to that. But it is a kind of reversal of the process. That the older you get, it's not just physically, I use that not to just get a cheap laugh, but when I said that old people even begin to physically resemble, it's like they're going back through childhood and it's just running backwards. It also is the process of the degree to which they were driven by secondary forces, which they were, or you can't put up with civilization. You can't live in the midst of it. You have to sort of go along with it, but as I keep trying to point out, you have to become like a secret hermit. It does no good to actually secrete yourself totally from civilization, from ordinary people. It's just nowadays almost impossible, and it's not necessarily a beneficial affair to begin with. But you can internally, and you can do it in total secrecy. Saves you all kinds of money and heartache and having to move all your belongings to Montana or St. Joseph's Island. Boy, you don't go there. It saves you a lot of trouble. It's just internally. You kind of go in this little log cabin, and you can stay there, and you can peek out, and nobody knows the difference. Ordinary people look right at you, and they think that you're living in a downtown condo. And you go, yeah. And actually, you're at your house up the lake. You go, yeah. It's just on the surface. You're in town going, yeah, okay. I mean, if you have to. Yeah, okay, all right. But internally, personally, individually, you're at your house on the lake. The kind of process is being reversed, what I started to say, is that the older you get, and as hormones begin to run down, which is that the electrochemical basis of becoming civilized, as everything else, But it's like now the process is going in reverse. Instead of you being a child and just being run off hormones, just being run off vital survival instincts, ordinary people, of course, attribute it to the peer pressure, the demands of society and your family. We'll assume that you people aren't going to stop with that anymore. That's the absolute dividing line between whether you know anything or don't know nothing. It is the needs of life to turn man into a secondary-driven creature. That is, to have influences, to process information, read energy, and at more than just the bio-survival level. And thus man goes from this primary level of just being a little walking around creature that takes in food and turns out doo-doo and spits up, that you become now more and more civilized, and by the time you, let's say, reach something close to adulthood, that you are now being driven by secondary forces. Looked at from the personal view, it would be from inside the ordinary mind looking out, it is that you are now pursuing secondary aims. And you understand but now, without that being any pejorative comment on the aims. But nowadays you do not work. None of you people hearing this or on TV or whatever, you are not, if you've got any sense, if you're just relatively sane, you are not, your goal in life is not, by God, to have something to eat tomorrow. It's just not. And if you have any intelligence at all and will bathe once or twice a week, it is not your desire, it's not your goal in life, by God, to get laid. I mean, if you can't get laid, I don't even want to see you, in this day and time. If you cannot get sex, if you're starving to death, or if your aim in life, by God, your aim in life is to be able to afford a blanket and maybe a warm, just a place to stay. You understand the silliness of it. So that is not what men are being driven by. And it doesn't matter what, I can just start picking out the obvious ones. What keeps a person going, let's say the age of 21, at the heart of their manly and womanlyhood. And hormones are really popping and driving the neurons. That's really, the second area is being driven with high, hot octane from the hormones. And you ask a person, well, what are you after in life? What's your goal? And it's going to be something along the lines, probably nowadays, of fame. Fame, power, and of course you can throw in fortune, but that about covers it. But I want to be somebody, by God. And you can narrow it down to, I want to be somebody, I want those people who impress me now, I want eventually for me to impress them. And you can start naming all the toys you want, and I want not just a place to live, not just a place to stay, which was to be the primary, not just to get laid. You want to be so rich or so famous, so attractive, so sought out by the public that the best looking women or men in the world, the kinds of people you now idolize and drool over their posters, they will hear that you just walked in a club. And they will ditch whoever they're with, whatever movie director, another rock star, just to come with, see, is that really him? It's those kind of dreams. There still, as always, they cannot be separated from the primary forces of life, but they are now at a different level. It is now what I've been calling the secondary. That drives a man or a woman for a while. Then the idea that I was proposing to do that reverses itself, that it sort of unwinds and has the dastardly, devilishly clever propensity to delude one into thinking it's something other than it is. To wit, wisdom, as it begins to unwind. And the older you get, again, if you're just sane and ordinary, just regular, run-of-the-mill person, is then you get past 21, 30, 40. Start doing. Now, the older you get, you're no longer run by the secondary. And the mind, again, if you tried to talk to an ordinary person about this, could explain it, could dismiss what I'm saying, just like that. Because even if they listened a little bit and thought, well, now it's getting to be some pretty deep philosophical, cow chipping, they would say, well, all right, I hear what you're saying, but I would still say there is, to a degree, a sense of increased wisdom and understanding about the nature of life. Now, we're talking about a 50 or 60-year-old man saying this in response to me. They go, because I hear what you're trying to say, but I'm just saying this, that, I don't know, you get old enough and you realize, well, fame. I mean, being famous is not that big a deal. Now, that's the guy who would have walked on broken glass to get a chance to sit in or to audition as a bass player with some band, or to get a literary agent of some repute to read his manuscript back when he was 21, would have done anything, made a gross fool of himself, just to try and draw attention to himself. And now here he sits on his porch in town at the age of 60, and with a certain kind of cavalier and apparent perceptive degree of wisdom wants to sort of poo-poo the idea of fame. Like, well, I don't know. I guess when I was young. What do you mean you guess? Well, I guess when I was young, I probably had those kind of ha-ha foolish dreams. It's not probably. If he was sane, if he was civilized in our day and time, anybody hearing this, you were driven. You had to pass for sane. You were driven by secondary forces, because we're back to the folly of me even asking, or me saying, what is anybody's aim in this day and time? To get up tomorrow? Is your whole point in working in life just so, by God, that you can get some food to eat? Like, no. Surviving is not the question anymore. That is not the aim to a man's mind. That's just secondary. Of course, I'm using it in a different way. Let's say that's not what life's about. But then once the hormones begin to run down in their mind, that is, the neurons are not now being driven by the same high octane, by the same intensity of their hormonal activity. They're not now at whatever, 40, 50, 60 as they were at 21. Now they can take what appears to be a more objective view of all matters secondary, of fame, sex. Oh, I used to chase women. I all had dreams, but my God, me and old Martha got married, and she'd been a good old girl. And you women can do your own sexist reversal of that. Hubert, don't amount to much, but hell, he's mine. Or well, hell, we've been married 35 years, and it's too old to go look for. Too late now to go look for another one. I guess I'll keep him. Ha ha, old Hubert. It all makes sense. Or they can dismiss being wealthy. Like, yeah, I used to want to be rich, and I had several businesses, and I made investments. I lost, several times. I was up in the six figures I had saved, and I would invest it, and I tried, and I lost it. What are you going to do? Here I'm 65. I don't know. Life is not money. I know I thought it was at one time in fame. You understand? You can dismiss the very things that drives the ordinary mind, that is, the civilized world. Once your hormones begin to die, and you don't have to be physically yourself about to die, because you may live to be 90. But once they begin to run down, which, by the way, is what women, they refer to as menopause, and then with men is that middle-aged crazies. It's all the same thing. It's hormones and it happens, and people realize it. And it's like, I've almost lost the will to live. The body may go ahead and live 30 or 40 years, but up here, it can be, indeed with ordinary people, it can be a crisis. I mean, it's so serious that, by God, they've even made movies about it. Which, that's serious enough for me. If Hollywood's going to pick it up as a theme, by God, this means something. Well, maybe that's not the final answer. But let me tell you this. If Kiss gets back together and they make a record about it, or David Lee goes back with Van Halen and they make a record about middle-aged crazies, then we'll know. Well, I just wanted to keep the record straight. Hollywood's one thing, but... The connection, which may still appear to be somewhat nebulous, between the running down of one's hormones, the natural running down of hormones, and its effect, for those of you that do not see necessarily the connection of me asking the musical question tonight of what is the difference between boiled cabbage and the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And then I threw in the cheap theatrics of going, and then I went, I knew it would be better the second time around. In case it seems to still be a nebulous connection between the natural running down of one's hormones and their paradigmatic effect upon one's thinking, or one's thinking as being fueled by hormones, and hormones begin to run down in their intensity. It may still be somewhat in question as to the connection between that and me talking about originality of thought. Really? Might have thought by now we've been just as clear as the North Sea on a good day. As far as the experience, as far as being able to scratch where one itches, to be able to find that which one thinks in the beginning is some great secret, some mystery hidden somewhere. It's connection between that and what I'm talking about now, the illusion, the almost indefensible, the almost invulnerable illusion that the mind takes on as it begins to get older and begins to naturally become less motivated, less driven by secondary forces. And of course, simultaneously, you become less and less a necessity. You become less and less an integral part of the primary parade of life, the civilized parade of life. You become more and more an incidental player. And you feel yourself so, which helps drive people somewhat middle-aged crazy. But the connection at which I'm trying to point between what I started out saying, that the actual ignition of one's consciousness to a higher level, the use of the brain in a way in which is not contemporaneously necessary, and then me saying that that is not, even though it's the best description available, even when I said that was to a certain degree not true, hogwash, there is a connection, believe it or not, between that and what I'm talking about now of the almost inevitable belief, the feel that you are becoming wiser the older you get. It is such a beautiful arrangement. It is because the latter, in fact, for one, I can put it this way just in an ad hoc manner, is because of the latter's reality that makes the former almost impossible to describe. You try. Anybody follow that sentence? It made perfect rhetorical sense, which I guess to some amateur Johnsonitis, Johnsonness may not mean much. It made perfect grammatical sense, and then some. As you begin to take age as being a sign of wisdom, and you feel I'm being less and less driven by superfluous matters, such as extramarital sex, continual sex, fame, trying to get rich. I'm past that. And it's good because now I can relax more. I don't feel so bad now I put on 30 extra pounds. And I can sit here on my porch, and I even look the part of being more philosophical. In fact, Martha told me one time that I kind of resemble at least one of those statues of Buddha. I think it was one of the ones from Ceylon. I feel more comfortable. I don't feel like going out and jogging. I don't worry about trying to watch the way I look. I'm not trying to pick up women. I got old Martha there. And hell, we don't even sleep together, once a year. And she smiled. And I said, what are you happy about? And she said, tonight's the night. It's an old Hindu joke. So, but everything in life's arranged that you feel, I'm going to try and bring this admitted, somewhat unclear connection together. But as you get older and feel as though I am getting wiser, I am being driven less by what you're inclined then to refer to after the fact as superficial, that even though you sit there, let's say that I'm just picking out an age, it's not necessarily magical, somewhere between 40 and 60 for men, wow, for everybody, that there you sit on your porch, and let us say that I'm inferring, if I didn't make it clear, but my fictitious figure was someone who had some degree of interest in matters metagnostic, metaphysical at some age. And so here they are sometime later, and they are more or less retired, and they fit my description of a man sitting on his porch, and now he's put on a nice amount of weight, and he doesn't worry about running, he doesn't worry about how he looks, and he may still even talk, if invited, he may even talk a certain enlightenment, metaphysical, mystical game. That is, let's say you hadn't seen him in years, or maybe you knew his son or something. You said, I understood that one time you studied with a guru so-and-so, a guy who wrote a book that I read. And the guy goes, yeah. You know, fresh out of college, I spent 6 months, I moved somewhere. I went to a commune, I went to a monastery. I got seriously involved with that. And you go, well, tell me about it. You know, what happened? I'm interested in such as that. And if you invite him, what I'm saying is he will still, in a sense, talk his interest of that kind of transcendental game and interest. He will, yeah. And you say, well, you know, no offense, but did you ever actually have an enlightenment? Did you ever actually become more conscious yourself? And I'm doing this as saying, I'm giving them the advantage. And he might go, well, son, and he's rocking, and he goes, your enthusiasm. Let's say that you're 20 or so. And he goes, son, I'm not trying to dampen your enthusiasm. Rock, rock, rock. Yeah. And he says, because I know this is always good. This is one of the great personal anecdotal bases of the world. As he stopped momentarily rocking and looks you dead in the eye, and he says, because I was once right where you are. Which has always been a great line in the ordinary world, because it makes the person receiving it, well, assuming that they have some respect for who they're talking to begin with. Like, would you give me the benefit of your wisdom, or et cetera? Either you found this guy used to be interested in things metaphysical. And so there you sit, figuratively speaking, sort of at his knee, or you pull up a chair and he's rocking. And for somebody to stop and go, let me tell you this, in case you think I don't know what you're talking about, I was once you. You understand? That is a great form of flattery insofar as the ordinary person receiving it. They take it as a great, like, oh, you're comparing me to you. It's a real nice line because it also lets the other person off the hook. Okay, well, you can think about it or not, because most of you are not in any danger of that, but to find someone that you thought would be of some superior intelligence, or might be a source of superior information, and they very shortly look at you and it's like, I know exactly where you are because I was there. And they rock some more. What it means when they say, I was there, you gotta, language doesn't mean shit, but it does reflect something if you get to where you can listen. That's why I had the closing one tonight, that a guy who had been working for years to try to achieve something. And it seemed sort of unclear, and he's unsure, and he finally asked life, he said, look, if I'm getting closer to it, couldn't you just like give me some kind of secret sign, or some? And I said, I'll do this much. I'll talk louder. I could have made the sentence more complex, but you're supposed to fill it in. That is, what life is saying is, no, I'm not going to say anything special. I'll keep saying who I am now, but I'll talk louder if that'll help. So you're supposed to fill in that part. That, no, I'm going to give you some kind of secret personal sign. And the tacit inference also being, you don't need one. But I'll talk louder. Which further the inference is, you should be listening louder. You don't need a secret sign. But the arrangement of feeling as though I used to be very excited. I was all enthused like you are, kid, the 60-year-old. But I don't waste my time on that now. And you might even be asking, well, does that mean that you gave up? Oh no, I think about it all the time. No, I didn't mean that. But what I meant was, I do not now expend energy in areas that have no bearing on it. I mean, I sit here now and I think I've still got some of the books. I've still got books on Buddhism and Sufism and all sorts of Christian mysticism, and I read such as that and the great philosophers. Oh no, more than ever, I tell you, son, I think about such as that. Rock, rock, rock. But what makes it even better, rock, 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 is that now, well, I don't brag, but I am, with age comes a certain amount of wisdom. I mean, if you just keep your eyes open and you're an open mind, then you've got to become a bit wiser just through the process of aging, rock, rock, rock. And so therefore, at least now, I'm not distracted. No offense, I guess I enjoyed some of it as a child, being foolish and not knowing better. But I am now not distracted by all those worldly ideas and concerns. I can now sit here and rock, and whenever I think to do it, think about important matters. Rock, rock, rock. I'll try it again. One of the reasons that the experience itself cannot be described, even after I said that the best description you ever heard was just simply me describing it as the activation of the nervous system in an individual's mind, in his brain itself, in an area in which it had never been ignited, and which under any natural, ordinary conditions in life never would have been. Or in those few cases where it happens to people, they do not benefit from it. That it is simply not a natural phenomenon. Even though I, in all due humility, said that was the best description you ever heard, it is still not adequate. But one of these reasons, what I was trying to get you to see the connection of the absolute inadequacy of any description, is not some sort of spiritual metaphysical conundrum or some vexing move that the gods have made upon man. It's that you start off with the enthusiasm. If I could grab a 17-year-old, let's say now, or this 21-year-old, and say, come here, you little, I heard what you asking that man. You don't know what it is? And I'd tell them. And they'd be so excited to go, yeah, yeah. But the excitement is, how shall I put it? I'll put it like this. Overkill. They can't help it. The hormones are so hot, they'll go, yeah, yeah. And miss it. But you got no better deal than to find this 60-year-old guy rocking on the porch who is mellowed, who has, through the natural process of age, bringing along a certain degree of wisdom, would now listen to what I said with no enthusiasm. Oh, you might rock and go, huh, yeah, I thought about that once. Wait a minute, I read that somewhere else, didn't I, son? Rock, rock, rock. It is unnatural to use your brain in an area not required by its own definition. If you're accepting my description, which is fair, that you do not need to do any more in your brain than you would have naturally done. You sure as hell do not need the likes of me or this kind of activity. No one does. Not by any reasonable, ordinary view, which is, again, part of what makes the promotion, the advertising, and the sell of such as this such a snap. While we have so many ex-Tupperware people here chomping at the plastic. There is no way, not if you understand anything, there is absolutely no way, there's no reality to telling people, by God, it's a good thing you got here. You got here just in time. If you hadn't met me, and not just me personally, but whoever was doing it, if you hadn't met me and got this information, I don't know what would have happened to you. Well, I do. You'd have gone ahead and lived just like you would have anyway. There is no collective, ordinary basis upon which to say, and I don't care who it is, what dream you've had of some past mystical system, some figure, no one needed it. Not in any wide range. Now, there were some people around him who needed it, him or her. There was a small handful, and it was not the ones who wrote the later histories. There were some who needed it, but that's it. And you're talking about a handful. And their needing it is, again, hyperbole, because they would have lived anyway. They might have gotten seriously involved with drugs, which, hey, could have been worse. You could have become an accountant or a door-to-door salesman. So it's not as bad as it may sound at first blush. No one needs it. It is not a requirement, which is always that even though life is fair with everybody else, life is super fair with the few. Everybody else, life just shoots you with a rifle at the end. But it's the few, it's like life is continually taking shots. Anytime you want to stamp and do this and go, here I am, it'll use a double-barrel shotgun, because it is both fair and unfair. It is both a benefit and a detriment. It is both a joy and a frustration. That is, that you don't need this. So it's both. The reason, putting feeble words and descriptions again, but the reason it is a joy is for the very reason that you don't need it. That is, I submit to you, the basis of the ideas and dreams of the Buddhas and etc. and all the people, where it's finally happening in a part of their brain. It's like a door's open and a whole new area of neurons goes, and they go. And you got all the statues and icons of Buddhas and Russian mystics and people going. Now, the best drug, well, you know all this, surely. Or you assume it. The best drugs you ever had in your life is, you want your money back compared to this. But part of the joy is, and after that, those who've heard such descriptions, they won't say, well, yeah, that's right, because now you're on speaking terms with God, or you in some way have earned some great spiritual benefit. Take it at this. It is more fun than you ever had in your life. I don't even have to do the other one about more fun than you ever had with your clothes on before. It's more fun you ever had with your clothes on, with a full stomach, a nice night's sleep, fame for it. It's just the most fun you ever had. But part of it is that you do not need it. That is what makes it a singular experience. It is absolutely, unconditionally not necessary. And beyond that, anybody who says it will benefit you when it's over, they got some Tupperware in the car. They just want to see if you'll go for that before they pull out, what they're really selling. But notice what I was getting at, my little picturization. With the view of doing something extraordinary, that is trying to do something not required by life, it is always a double-barreled shot at you. The difficulty, if you want to look at when I said it's both, it's a pleasure and a great pain in the ass. That it can be let's leave it at that. I was giving you the dichotomous that it can be this and that. The thing is, since you don't need it, since no one needs it, and it is not natural, but you do not need it, period. It is not required by anybody's definition. Then you can say, well, Jesus, no wonder it's so hard. No, I can even get my fingers in the cracker to even get some idea what you're talking about. It just comes and goes like a fog rolling in and out. Yeah. But by the same token is why, once you have it, I just leave it simple statement. It's more fun than you ever had. Nobody has ever had it and asked for their money back. No one's ever had it and gone, that's it. But that's the reason, or one of the descriptions, is because it is absolutely, unconditionally, 100% unnecessary. Because if it's necessary, all it is eating, screwing. I mean, as great as all that is, sleeping. If that's all it was, that'd be all it is. And anybody could do it. Now, I assume you see the connection. Right, theatrics. Or the president of universities hanging out degrees with a joy buzzer.